passage is adapted from Biomimicry, Innovation Inspired by Nature by Janine M. Benyus. If anybody is growing biomass, it's us. To keep our system from collapsing on itself, industrial ecologists are attempting to build a no-waste economy. Instead of a linear production system, which binges on virgin raw materials and spews out unusable waste, they envision a web of closed loops in which a minimum of raw materials comes in the door and very little waste escapes. So here, the author is introducing a dilemma with the way that our economy, in here when she says our system, our economy, she's talking about the Western world, United States, Europe, places like this. A major problem is trying to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. So ideally, industries and companies would take in only a small amount of raw materials and produce only a small amount of waste, and everything else would be recycled. This would create a very good, a very sustainable system. Without this, if a company instead takes in lots and lots of raw materials and produces lots of unusable waste, then it's not sustainable. We're going to have trouble. Everything's going to collapse eventually because there's no more raw natural resources anymore to use. The first examples of this no-waste economy are collections of companies clustered in an eco-park and connected in a food chain, with each firm's waste going next door to become the other firm's raw material or fuel. So here the author is introducing an interesting idea to help create sustainable communities. And that idea is to arrange industries, arrange companies in such a way that the waste of one industry becomes the raw material of the next. So essentially you're recycling along a long chain where the waste that one produces is always being used by another one to create something new. In Denmark, the town of Kalundborg has the world's most elaborate prototype of an eco-park. 4 companies are co-located, and all of them are linked, dependent on one another for resources or energy. The Osnabrück Power Company pipes some of its waste steam to power the engines of 2 companies, the Statoil refinery and Novo Nordisk, a pharmaceutical plant. Another pipeline delivers the remaining waste steam to heat 3,500 homes in the town, eliminating the need for oil furnaces. The power plant also delivers its cooling water, now toasty warm, to 57 ponds worth of fish. The fish revel in the warm water, and the fish farm produces 250 tons of sea trout and turbot each year. So here, the author starts talking about this one specific town in Denmark. And in this specific town, a couple of the industries are arranged in a way that the waste of one is used by another. And the author has given a couple of examples here. Waste steam being used to power, for instance, homes or other processes. Waste warm water being used to help fish farmeries have happy fish that are growing, lots of food sources. The author continues, waste steam from the power company is used by Novo Nordisk to heat the fermentation tanks that produce insulin and enzymes. This process, in turn, creates 700,000 tons of nitrogen-rich slurry a year, which used to be dumped into the fjord. Now Novo bequeaths it free to nearby farmers. A pipeline delivers the fertilizer to the growing plants, which are in turn harvested to feed the bacteria in the fermentation tanks. So this nitrogen-rich slurry produced by one company used to just be wasted, so it used to just be dumped away. But the companies realized that that nitrogen-rich slurry could actually work as a fertilizer to help grow plants on the farms. So now the company has set up so that it will transport that nitrogen-rich slurry to farmers to help grow plants, which could in turn be used to restart the process over again. So it's very economical. Meanwhile, back at the Statoil refinery, waste gas that used to go up a smokestack is now purified. Some is used internally as fuel, some is piped to the power company, and the rest goes to Gyproc, the wallboard maker next door. The sulfur squeezed from the gas during purification is loaded onto trucks and sent to Kemira, a company that produces sulfuric acid. The power company also squeezes sulfur from its emissions, but converts most of it to calcium sulfate, industrial gypsum, which it sells to Gyproc for wallboard. So here's some more examples. The waste gas that used to just go up into the atmosphere and be very harmful is recycled, broken down, and used by many different companies to produce new materials. So in this one particular town in Denmark, the industries have been set up to be very resourceful and to use each other's waste in creative ways. Although Kallenberg is a cozy co-location, industries need not be geographically close to operate in a food web, as long as they are connected by a mutual desire to use waste. Already, some companies are designing their processes so that any waste that falls in the production room floor is valuable and can be used by someone else. In this game of designed offal, a process with lots of waste, as long as it's wanted waste, may be better than one with a small amount of waste that must be landfilled or burned. As author Daniel Chiras says, more companies are recognizing that technologies that produce byproducts society cannot absorb are essentially failed technologies. So in this paragraph, the author highlights the importance of finding ways to use waste. So it's not necessarily a problem if a particular company, a particular industry produces waste. The problem comes when that waste is unusable. So if a company produces lots of waste, but that waste can be used to do something else, that's fine. That works out perfectly good. But if the company produces even a small amount of waste that cannot be used for anything, that must just be dumped in a landfill, then that's very bad. And this particular author that is being quoted here, Daniel Chiras, goes as far to say as that's a failed company. So that's a company that's not going to be able to last forever. Eventually it's going to, use up all of its materials, produce a lot of waste, and it's going to die. So if we want sustainable companies, we need to use the waste products to do something useful. So far, we've talked about recycling within a circle of companies. But what happens when a product leaves the manufacturer and passes to the consumer, and finally to the trash can? Right now, a product visits one of two fates at the end of its useful life. It can be buried in a landfill or incinerated, or it can be recaptured through recycling or reuse. So here we have a small transition paragraph. We're transitioning from our earlier discussion about industries being able to use each other's waste to something that's focusing a little bit more on the industry-consumer relationship. So once the consumer buys the product, it's kind of in the consumer's hands. What happens to it? Does it get thrown away and just go into the landfill? Or does it get reused into something useful? Traditionally, manufacturers haven't had to worry about what happens to a product after it leaves their gates. But that is starting to change, thanks to laws now in the wings in Europe and headed for the United States, that will require companies to take back their durable goods, such as refrigerators, washers, and cars, at the end of their useful lives. In Germany, the take-back law starts with the initial sale. Companies must take back all their packaging or hire middlemen to do the recycling. Take-back laws mean that manufacturers who have been saying this product can be recycled must now say, we recycle our products and packaging. So here, the author's talking about some new legislation, new laws that are happening in Europe and may soon happen in the United States. And these laws put more burden on the manufacturer, on the company, and less burden on the consumer, on the individual purchasing a product. And these laws are saying that the manufacturer must be the one responsible for the ultimate recycling of a product. So they cannot just release the product to the consumer and not care what happens to it. They have to take responsibility. They have to say, we will take back that product at the end of its life. So if you have a car and the car eventually breaks down, the manufacturer must take back that car and recycle it themselves. When the onus shifts in this way, it's suddenly in the company's best interest to design a product that will either last a long time or come apart easily for recycling or reuse. Refrigerators in cars will be assembled using easy open snaps instead of glued together joints. And for recyclability, each part will be made of one material instead of 20. Even simple things, like the snack bags for potato chips, will be streamlined. Today's bags, which have 9 thin layers made of 7 different materials, will no doubt be replaced by one material that can preserve freshness and can easily be remade into a new bag. So, if that burden is placed on the manufacturer, it will encourage the manufacturer to make products that are easy to recycle. So the manufacturer will start doing things like making products that are easy to take apart and using one material as opposed to a blend, because it's much easier to recycle one material than it is to recycle many materials. So according to this author, these new kinds of laws will help make the world more sustainable, help make products easier to recycle.